The scent of garlic and fresh basil hung thick in the air at Bella Notte, mixing with the sharp undertone of industrial cleaner I had mopped across the floors just an hour ago. My feet throbbed inside my worn black flats, the kind with soles so thin I could feel every crack in the tile beneath me. 2 years of carrying heavy trays and dodging handsy customers had taught me to smile through exhaustion, to disappear into the background, to become invisible when I needed to be. Tonight, I needed to be invisible more than ever. I adjusted the black apron tied around my waist, tugging at the fabric to ensure it fell loosely over my midsection. The slight curve there was still easy to hide beneath baggy uniforms and strategic posture, but I was always aware of it now. 12 weeks. 12 weeks of morning sickness masked as stomach bugs, of dodging questions from Sophia, the only coworker who seemed to notice I had stopped drinking the end-of-shift wine we all shared. The dinner rush was building. Couples filtered through the heavy wooden doors, shaking rain from their umbrellas, filling the cozy Italian restaurant with the buzz of conversation and the clink of glasses. I moved between tables with practiced efficiency, refilling water glasses, reciting specials I had memorized 2 years ago, keeping my eyes constantly scanning. Always scanning. That was another habit I had developed, one of many survival mechanisms etched into my nervous system by 18 months with Evan Blake. Marco, the floor manager, appeared at my elbow with his perpetual clipboard and pinched expression. Camille, table 12 just sat. VIP. Very important, very private. Don't hover, don't chat, don't screw this up. I nodded without looking at him, already grabbing menus from the host stand. Got it. I mean it. His voice dropped lower. This guy tips like he's printing money, but he doesn't like small talk. Just be professional. Professional? I could do professional. Professional was safe. Professional meant keeping my head down, my mouth shut, and my tips steady enough to cover next month's rent and the prenatal vitamins I had started buying in bulk. Table 12 was positioned in the far corner of the restaurant, partially hidden behind an arrangement of potted ferns and a decorative column. The best seat in the house for someone who wanted privacy. Someone who didn't want to be watched. I approached with menus tucked against my chest, my gaze lowered in the deferential posture Marco had drilled into all of us. Good evening, and welcome to Bella Notte. May I start you with something from our wine list? The man at the table didn't respond immediately. I felt his attention before I saw it, a weight settling over me like a physical presence. When I finally lifted my eyes, I found myself staring into a face that seemed carved from stone. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, eyes the color of winter ice. He wore a dark suit that probably cost more than our entire wine inventory, the jacket tailored so precisely it seemed to breathe with him. His shirt was charcoal gray, unbuttoned enough to reveal a hint of ink crawling up his collarbone. Something about the way he held himself, absolutely still, absolutely controlled, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Water, he said. His voice was low, accented. Russian, I thought, though the single word wasn't enough to be certain. And the Barolo, the 2015. I nodded, jotting the order on my pad even though I didn't need to. The movement gave me something to do with my trembling hands. Excellent choice. I'll have that right out for you. I turned to leave, already calculating how quickly I could drop off the wine and disappear into the kitchen when the front door opened again. The sound shouldn't have meant anything. Doors opened constantly in a restaurant. People came and went, and I had learned to filter out the ambient noise of a busy evening. But something in the quality of this particular door opening, the way the air shifted, the sudden spike in my pulse, made me freeze mid-step. I knew before I looked. My body knew. Every nerve ending that had been conditioned to recognize danger screamed at me to run, to hide, to make myself as small as possible. Evan Blake stood in the entrance of Bella Notte, water dripping from his expensive raincoat, that familiar smile playing across his features. the smile that promised charm to everyone watching, and something darker to anyone who knew him. The tray in my hands rattled. I steadied it through sheer force of will, my knuckles whitening around the edges. He hadn't seen me yet. His eyes swept the restaurant with the casual ownership of a man who believed the world existed for his convenience. I watched him speak to the hostess, watched her laugh at something he said, watched her lead him toward a table near the center of the room. Too close. He was too close. I backed toward the kitchen, my movements careful, controlled, nothing that would draw attention. The swinging door was only 15 feet away. If I could just make it there, if I could hide in the back until he left, maybe he wouldn't notice me. Maybe this would just be another near miss, another night of holding my breath and praying. "Excuse me." The Russian voice stopped me cold. I turned to find the man from table 12 watching me with those unsettling pale eyes. He had noticed something. I didn't know what my face was doing, what my body was betraying, but he had noticed. "Is there a problem?" he asked quietly. The question hung between us. I should have said no. I should have smiled and apologized and fetched his wine and pretended everything was fine, the way I had been pretending for 2 years. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking, and Evan was sitting 30 feet away, and I was pregnant with a baby I couldn't afford to raise but refused to give up. And suddenly the careful walls I had built around myself felt like they were made of paper. I grabbed a napkin from my apron. My pen moved before I could second-guess myself. The words scrawled in handwriting I barely recognized as my own. "My ex is here. Please don't let him hurt me tonight." I folded the napkin once, twice, and placed it on the table beside his water glass. Then I walked away without looking back, my heart hammering so loudly I was certain everyone in the restaurant could hear it. What had I done? This man was a stranger, a customer. I had just handed him my vulnerability on a piece of paper, trusting someone I didn't know to protect me from someone I knew all too well. From the corner of my eye, I saw him unfold the napkin, saw him read it, saw his expression shift into something I couldn't name. When I returned with his wine 5 minutes later, my hands finally steady, 2 men had appeared at the edge of the dining room. They wore dark suits and stood with the particular stillness of people trained to watch everything. Security. His security. The Russian didn't look at me when I poured his Barolo. He simply said very quietly, "Which one is he?" I tilted my head almost imperceptibly toward the center of the room. His gaze followed my direction, settling on Evan like a predator marking prey. Then he picked up his wine glass, took a slow sip, and spoke without looking at me. "He will not touch you tonight, or any night after." I wanted to ask how he could possibly promise that. I wanted to ask who he was, what he did, why a stranger would care about a waitress's problems. But my throat had closed around the words, and all I could do was nod and retreat to the safety of the kitchen, where I leaned against the walk-in cooler and tried to remember how to breathe. I had just asked a mafia boss for help. I didn't know it yet, but I would. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of automatic movements and barely contained terror. I refilled water glasses without seeing the faces attached to them. I recited specials to tables I couldn't remember approaching. Every nerve in my body remained tuned to Evan's location, tracking his movements the way a rabbit tracks a circling hawk. He knew I was here. I could feel it in the way his laughter carried just a little too loudly across the dining room, in the deliberate casualness with which he positioned himself to face the kitchen doors. He was waiting, watching, playing the game we had played 100 times before, the one where he pretended everything was normal while slowly tightening the noose. But something was different tonight. Every time I ventured into the dining room, I felt another presence tracking me too. The Russian at table 12 hadn't moved from his seat, but his attention seemed to fill the entire space. His 2 security men had positioned themselves at opposite ends of the restaurant, their gazes sweeping the room in coordinated patterns. They watched Evan with the kind of focused intensity that made my stomach clench. What had I started? Around 9 o'clock, Evan pushed back from his table and stood. My heart seized as I watched him head toward the hallway that led to the restrooms, the same hallway that passed directly by the kitchen entrance. I pressed myself against the wall beside the walk-in cooler, praying he would keep walking. He didn't. The kitchen door swung open, and there he was. Same golden hair, same perfect smile, same eyes that could shift from warm to cruel in the space between heartbeats. He was wearing the cologne I used to love, the one that now made bile rise in my throat. Camille. He said my name like he owned it. I've been looking everywhere for you. You shouldn't be back here. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Staff only. I just wanted to say hello. He stepped closer, and I felt the wall press against my shoulder blades. Nowhere to go. You look good. Tired, but good. New job treating you well? I didn't answer. I had learned that engaging only prolonged the encounter, gave him more ammunition, more openings. I heard you moved again. His smile widened, and there it was, the edge beneath the charm. Third time this year, right? That's a lot of running, Cammy. Must be exhausting. The kitchen door swung open again. I didn't see where the Russian came from. One moment the doorway was empty. The next he was standing there, filling the frame with his broad shoulders and that preternatural stillness. His pale eyes fixed on Evan with an expression that made the temperature in the kitchen drop 10 degrees. You are in a restricted area, he said. His accent was more pronounced now, the words clipped and precise. The restrooms are the other direction. Evan turned, his smile faltering for just a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. Sorry, I got turned around. Just catching up with an old friend. She does not appear to want catching up. The Russian hadn't moved from the doorway. He didn't need to. His presence alone seemed to create a barrier Evan couldn't cross. I suggest you return to your table. Something passed between them. Some masculine calculation I couldn't quite follow. Evan was taller, broader in the shoulders, the kind of man who dominated most rooms through sheer physical presence. But the Russian didn't seem to notice. He stood there with his hands loose at his sides, utterly calm, utterly certain, and I watched Evan's confidence waver. Do I know you? Evan asked, his voice harder now. No. A pause. But I know you, Evan Blake. I know where you work. I know where you live. I know about the restraining order you violated 17 times in the past 6 months. The Russian's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I know many things. The color drained from Evan's face. I had never seen that expression on him before. The sudden realization that he was not the most dangerous person in the room. We have no quarrel, Evan said carefully. Not yet. The Russian stepped aside, creating a clear path to the door. I suggest you keep it that way. Evan looked at me one last time, and I saw the fury burning beneath his careful mask. This wasn't over. We both knew it. But he also knew, somehow, that tonight was not the night to push. He left without another word. I sagged against the wall, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. The Russian caught my elbow before I could slide to the floor, his grip firm but surprisingly gentle. Breathe, he said quietly. He is gone. How did you... I couldn't finish the sentence. My thoughts were scattered, fragmented. Who are you? He released my arm once he was certain I wouldn't collapse. My name is Nikolai Artemyev, and you do not need to know more than that. Nikolai Artemyev. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it suggested it should. The way the other kitchen staff had suddenly found urgent business at the far end of the room suggested it definitely should. Why are you helping me? I managed. He studied me for a long moment, those winter pale eyes seeing something I couldn't identify. Because you asked. That's not. I shook my head. People don't just help strangers because they ask. Perhaps the people you have known. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card. Simple white cardstock with a phone number embossed in silver. No name, no title, just the number. If he returns, if he contacts you, if you feel unsafe for any reason, call this number. I stared at the card in my trembling fingers. I can't afford. There is no cost. His voice softened almost imperceptibly. Not everything is a transaction, Camille. He knew my name. Of course he did. He had known Evan's name, Evan's address, the details of a restraining order I had filed in family court 18 months ago. This man had resources I couldn't begin to comprehend. I don't understand, I whispered. You do not need to understand. He straightened his cuffs, a gesture so casual it seemed almost absurd given the circumstances. Finish your shift. My men will ensure he does not return tonight. Tomorrow we will discuss how to make certain he does not return ever. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. The child, he said without looking at me. Does he know? My hand flew to my stomach before I could stop it. How did you? You protect your midsection when you move. You refused the wine Sophia offered at the start of your shift. You carry yourself like someone guarding something precious. He glanced back, and something almost human flickered in his expression. He does not know. No. The word came out broken. No one knows. Nikolai nodded once. Then no one will learn from me. He disappeared through the kitchen door, leaving me clutching his card like a lifeline, wondering how my life had become so strange that a mafia boss felt safer than the man I had once planned to marry. When I finally emerged from the kitchen 20 minutes later, Evan's table was empty. The hostess told me he had paid his bill and left in a hurry, looking pale. She seemed confused by his sudden departure. I wasn't confused. I was terrified and grateful and utterly lost, standing in the middle of a restaurant that suddenly felt like foreign territory. At table 12, a single folded napkin sat beside an untouched dessert menu. I opened it to find a $100 tip and 3 words written in precise, angular handwriting. You are safe. I tucked the napkin into my apron and went back to work, pretending my world hadn't just shifted on its axis. Nikolai Artemyev returned to Belanote 3 nights later. I had spent those 72 hours in a state of suspended animation, jumping at every sound, checking my phone obsessively for messages that never came. Evan had gone silent, which was somehow worse than his usual harassment. Silent Evan was planning Evan. Silent Evan was dangerous Evan. But when I walked into work on Thursday evening and saw that familiar figure seated at table 12, something in my chest loosened. I hadn't realized how tightly I had been holding myself until the tension began to drain away. You came back, I said, setting down his water glass. I said I would. He gestured to the seat across from him. Sit. We should talk. I glanced toward the kitchen, where Marco was surely watching. I'm working. Marco has been compensated for your break. Nikolai's expression didn't change, but something like amusement flickered in his eyes. Generously. I sat. Up close, in the warm light of the table's candle, he looked different than he had during our first encounter. Still sharp, still dangerous, but more human somehow. I noticed the faint lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, the way his hands wrapped around his water glass with a kind of unconscious elegance. Tell me about Evan Blake, he said. The question hit me like a physical blow. I had spent 2 years trying not to talk about Evan, trying to bury those 18 months of my life so deep they couldn't hurt me anymore. But Nikolai was watching me with those winter eyes, patient and implacable, and I found the words spilling out before I could stop them. "We met at a coffee shop," I heard myself say. 4 years ago, I was 23, working as a receptionist at a law firm, thinking I had my whole life figured out. He was charming, attentive. He remembered every little thing I mentioned: my favorite flowers, the book I was reading, the way I liked my coffee. It felt like being seen for the first time. Nikolai listened without interrupting. The first year was perfect. Everyone loved him. My friends, my family, my coworkers. He was successful, handsome, devoted. When he proposed, I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. I laughed, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. I didn't see the signs, or maybe I saw them and chose not to look. What signs? Small things at first. He didn't like my friends, thought they were a bad influence. He worried when I worked late, wanted to know where I was at all times. He bought me clothes because my taste was too casual. He suggested I change my hair, my makeup, the way I talked. I twisted the napkin in my lap. By the time I realized what was happening, I had already quit my job, moved into his apartment, lost contact with everyone who might have helped me. And then, the memories pressed against the walls I had built around them, demanding to be acknowledged. I closed my eyes. The first time he hit me was on our 1-year anniversary. I had burned the dinner I was cooking, and he was tired from work, and suddenly I was on the floor with blood in my mouth and he was crying, apologizing, promising it would never happen again. I opened my eyes to find Nikolai's expression unchanged, but something in the quality of his stillness had shifted. It happened again, and again, and again. "How did you leave?" This was the part I never talked about, the part that still woke me in cold sweats, gasping for air. "I didn't leave. He threw me down a flight of stairs." The words came out flat, emotionless, disconnected from the terror of that night. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. Broken arm, cracked ribs, internal bleeding. The doctors called the police. I pressed charges while he was out of state on business, filed the restraining order, and disappeared before he could stop me. Nikolai was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than I had ever heard it. "And the child?" My hand moved to my stomach, the gesture automatic now. "A mistake. A moment of weakness 3 months ago, when he found me at my old apartment and convinced me he had changed. I believed him for one night." Tears burned behind my eyes. "I will not make that mistake again." Does he know? No. And he can never know. I met Nikolai's gaze, desperation making me bold. If Evan finds out I'm pregnant, he will never stop. The baby will be leverage, a weapon, a way to control me forever. I would rather die than let that happen. Something dangerous flickered across Nikolai's face. "That will not be necessary. You can't promise that. You don't know him, what he's capable of." "I know exactly what he is capable of." Nikolai reached into his jacket and produced a folder, sliding it across the table. "I also know what I am capable of." I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, documents, records I didn't understand. Evan's financial statements, property records, a detailed timeline of his movements over the past 6 months. "You've been watching him?" "Since Thursday night." Nikolai's voice was matter-of-fact. "Evan Blake has significant debts to people who do not forgive unpaid loans. His business is failing. His family has distanced themselves. He is a man with nothing left to lose, which makes him dangerous." He paused, but not invincible. I stared at the documents, trying to process what he was offering. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing." "That's not possible. No one does something for nothing. Nikolai's lips curved into something that might have been a smile on a warmer face. Perhaps I am not no one. I'm serious. I closed the folder and pushed it back toward him. I've learned the hard way that men who offer protection always want something in return. Control, obedience, gratitude that becomes obligation. I can't afford to owe anyone anything. He studied me for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable sensation of being seen in a way I hadn't experienced since that first night, when I'd handed him a napkin and my vulnerability in the same breath. My mother, he said finally, was a woman very much like you. Strong, stubborn, unwilling to accept help even when she needed it most. His accent thickened slightly, the Russian consonants becoming more pronounced. She died because she was too proud to ask for protection from the man who eventually killed her. I was 12 years old. The confession hung between us, raw and unexpected. I am not offering you control or obligation, he continued. I am offering you safety. What you do with it is your choice. If you wish to walk away after tonight, I will not stop you. But I will not stand by and watch another woman destroyed by a man who believes he owns her. I didn't know what to say. The cynical part of me, the part that had been forged in Evan's cruelty, whispered that this was just another manipulation, another trap disguised as kindness. But something in Nikolai's eyes, some ancient grief that mirrored my own, made me want to believe him. I need time, I whispered, to think. He nodded once, rising from the table. Take all the time you need, but keep the phone number, and know that my offer does not expire. He left a stack of bills beside his untouched wine glass and walked out into the night, leaving me alone with a folder full of secrets and a decision I wasn't ready to make. The next 2 weeks established a pattern I hadn't expected. Nikolai appeared at Bella Notte every evening I worked, always at table 12, always ordering the same Barolo he never finished. He never demanded my attention, never pushed for conversation, never made me feel obligated to sit with him. He simply existed in the corner of the restaurant like a silent guardian, his presence a constant reminder that I was not as alone as I had believed. His security men became fixtures too, rotating through shifts with military precision. They never spoke to me directly, but I noticed the way they tracked my movements, the way they positioned themselves between me and any male customer who lingered too long at my tables. It should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt like breathing for the first time in years. Evan had gone quiet. No calls, no texts, no surprise appearances at my apartment or workplace. The restraining order I had filed sat dormant, unchallenged. Part of me wanted to believe he had given up, moved on, found someone else to torment. But the part of me that had learned to read his patterns knew better. Evan was planning something, and the longer he stayed silent, the worse it would be when he finally struck. It was Sophia who finally pushed me over the edge. Camille. She caught my arm as I was leaving after a particularly exhausting shift, her round face creased with concern. I need to tell you something, but you have to promise not to freak out. My stomach dropped. What is it? There was a guy here earlier today before your shift started, asking questions about you. What hours you worked, who you talked to, whether you were seeing anyone. She bit her lip. Blonde hair, expensive suit, smile like a toothpaste commercial. Ring any bells? The world tilted sideways. I grabbed the edge of the host stand to steady myself. What did you tell him? Nothing. I said I didn't know anyone named Camille. Sophia's eyes were wide with worry. But he didn't believe me. He kept pushing, asking about the Russian guy who's been coming in every night. He seemed really interested in him. Evan knew about Nikolai. Of course he did. Evan made it his business to know everything about anyone who might threaten his control. And now he was gathering intelligence, looking for weaknesses, preparing his next move. I found Nikolai's card in my wallet where I had tucked it 2 weeks ago. My fingers trembled as I dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. Camille. He was here today, asking questions. The words tumbled out in a rush. He knows about you. He's planning something. I know. Nikolai's voice was calm, unsurprised. My people intercepted him outside your apartment building this afternoon. He was carrying photographs, surveillance equipment, documents related to your pregnancy that he obtained from your medical provider. Ice flooded my veins. He knows about the baby? He does now. I sank onto the bench beside the host stand, my legs no longer capable of supporting me. This was the scenario I had feared most, the nightmare that had kept me awake for months. Evan with knowledge of the child, Evan with leverage, Evan with a reason to never, ever let me go. What do? I whispered. You accept my protection. There was no triumph in his voice, no satisfaction at being proven right, only quiet certainty. Fully this time, not from a distance. What does that mean? It means you do not return to your apartment tonight. It means you allow me to relocate you somewhere safe while I deal with this situation permanently. A pause. It means you trust me, Camille, even though every instinct tells you not to. Trust. Such a small word for such an enormous leap. Why? I asked, the question I had been afraid to voice for weeks. Why do you care what happens to me? The line was silent for so long I thought he had hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than I had ever heard it. Because you handed me a napkin in a crowded restaurant and asked for help instead of suffering in silence. Because you are carrying a child you will do anything to protect. Because you remind me of someone I could not save. Another pause. And because, in 18 months of watching you work and struggle and survive, I have come to care about what happens to you. More than I should. More than is wise. 18 months. He had been watching me for 18 months. Long before the napkin. Long before that first night at table 12. You knew who I was before I sat down at your table. Yes. Why didn't you say something sooner? Because you were not ready to hear it. And because I had no right to interfere in your life uninvited. His voice softened. The napkin changed that. You invited me in. I closed my eyes, processing this revelation. 18 months of invisible protection. 18 months of a stranger watching over me, waiting for the moment I would reach out for help. Where would I go? I finally asked. I have a property outside the city. Secure. Private. You would have your own space, your own freedom. My staff would ensure you want for nothing while I resolve the situation with Evan. Resolve, I repeated. What does that mean exactly? It means he will never threaten you or your child again. Nikolai's voice had gone cold, sharp as a blade. How that resolution occurs depends entirely on his choices. I should have been horrified. I should have refused to participate in whatever violence he was implying. But I thought of the stairs Evan had thrown me down, the hospital bed where I had learned to breathe through cracked ribs, the months of looking over my shoulder and jumping at shadows. Okay, I heard myself say. I'll come with you. There is a car waiting outside Bellinot. Black sedan, tinted windows. My driver, Alexei, will take you to the property. I will meet you there within the hour. Nikolai. I paused, uncertain how to express what I was feeling. Thank you. For everything. Do not thank me yet. Something complicated moved through his voice. We have a long way to go. He hung up, and I walked out of Bellinot into a night that smelled like rain and possibility. The black sedan was exactly where he had said it would be. The driver, a stone-faced man with kind eyes, held the door open for me without a word. As the city lights faded behind us and the sedan carried me toward whatever came next, I placed my hand over my stomach and felt my daughter kick for the first time. "It's going to be okay," I whispered to her. "We're going to be okay." For the first time in years, I almost believed it. The property Nikolai had described as outside the city turned out to be a sprawling estate in the Hudson Valley, hidden behind iron gates and surrounded by acres of manicured grounds. The house itself was a study in understated elegance, all stone walls and tall windows, and rooms that seemed to breathe with quiet luxury. My suite occupied the entire east wing of the second floor. A bedroom larger than my old apartment, a bathroom with a tub I could practically swim in, a sitting room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a fireplace that crackled with real wood. Everything I could possibly need had been anticipated and provided, from prenatal vitamins in the medicine cabinet to maternity clothes hanging in the closet, sized perfectly. It should have felt like a prison. It felt like sanctuary. Nikolai arrived an hour after I did, finding me standing at the window of my sitting room, watching the sun set over the distant hills. He had changed from his usual suit into something more casual, a dark sweater and slacks that made him look almost approachable. "You found everything you need?" he asked from the doorway. I turned, wrapping my arms around myself. "More than everything, this place is incredible. It belonged to my grandmother." He moved into the room, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet. "She came here after leaving Russia. Said the hills reminded her of home." He paused beside me at the window. "I thought you might find peace here, as she did." Peace. The word felt foreign on my tongue. "I don't remember what that feels like." "You will." He reached out, and for a moment I thought he was going to touch me. Instead, his hand stopped just short of my shoulder, hovering in the space between us. "May I?" Such a small question. Such an enormous shift from the men I had known, who took what they wanted without asking. "Yes," I whispered. His hand settled on my shoulder, warm and steady through the fabric of my borrowed sweater. We stood in silence, watching the last light fade from the sky, and I felt something I couldn't name begin to unfurl in my chest. "Tell me what happens now," I said. "Now, you rest. You focus on your health and the baby's health. You allow yourself to heal in ways that have nothing to do with physical wounds." His thumb traced a small circle on my shoulder, unconscious and gentle. "And I take care of Evan Blake." "How?" "You do not need those details." "I want them anyway." I turned to face him, and his hand fell away from my shoulder. "If you're going to do something in my name, I need to know what it is." Nikolai studied me for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his pale eyes. "Very well. Evan has significant financial vulnerabilities, debts to organizations that do not take kindly to unpaid obligations. I have arranged for those debts to be called in immediately. By the end of the week, he will be facing bankruptcy, asset seizure, and legal action from multiple creditors. That won't stop him. Evan doesn't care about money, only control." "I am aware." Nikolai's expression hardened, which is why I have also arranged for certain photographs to reach his employer, evidence of activities that will result in immediate termination and industry blacklisting. His social standing will be destroyed, his professional reputation eliminated. Every source of power he relies on will be stripped away, one by one. I felt a chill run down my spine. Not fear exactly, more like awe at the methodical precision of his destruction. And if that doesn't work? If he still comes after me? Something dangerous moved across Nikolai's face. "Then I will take more direct measures, but I hope it does not come to that. I prefer not to create messes that require cleaning." The implication hung in the air between us, heavy and unmistakable. I should have been horrified. I should have demanded he promise not to hurt anyone. But I thought of my daughter, growing safe beneath my heart, and I found I couldn't summon the moral outrage I was supposed to feel. "Thank you," I said instead. Nikolai's expression softened. You should eat. The kitchen has prepared dinner, and you have been surviving on restaurant leftovers for too long. He was right. The meal that appeared in my sitting room an hour later was the most delicious thing I had tasted in months. Fresh vegetables and perfectly cooked protein and desserts that made me want to weep with gratitude. I ate until I couldn't eat anymore, then fell asleep in the enormous bed and dreamed of nothing at all. The days that followed took on a rhythm I hadn't expected. Nikolai came to the estate each evening, sharing dinner with me in the formal dining room or the cozier breakfast nook, depending on my mood. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, books we had read, places we wanted to see, the small details of our lives that had nothing to do with the violence that had brought us together. I learned that he had built his empire from nothing after his mother's death, driven by a fury he had eventually learned to channel into cold precision. I learned that he read poetry in Russian when he couldn't sleep, that he had once wanted to be a pianist, that the tattoos hidden beneath his shirts told the story of every man he had lost along the way. He learned about me too. My childhood in a small town upstate, my dreams of becoming a teacher before financial necessity pushed me into service work, the way I still believed in kindness despite everything that had happened to me. We didn't touch again after that first night at the window. Some unspoken boundary held us apart, a recognition that whatever was growing between us needed time to develop roots before it could bear weight. But I felt his eyes on me when he thought I wasn't looking. I heard the way his voice softened when he said my name. I noticed how he positioned himself between me and every door, every window, every potential threat, even within the safety of his own home. Nikolai Artemyev was falling in love with me, and God help me, I was falling too. 2 weeks into my stay at the estate, he arrived with news. It is done. He sat across from me in the breakfast nook, his expression carefully neutral. Evan Blake has been destroyed. His career, his finances, his social standing, all of it gone. He has nothing left but his rage. And his rage is considerable, I said quietly. Yes. Nikolai's jaw tightened. Which is why I have arranged one final measure, a conversation between Evan and certain associates of mine, making clear that any further contact with you will result in consequences far more severe than financial ruin. You threatened him. I made him understand reality. Nikolai reached across the table and took my hand, the first deliberate touch since that night at the window. He will never bother you again, Camille. I give you my word. I looked at our joined hands, his scarred and strong, mine small and trembling. What happens now? Where do I go? Wherever you wish. His thumb traced circles on my palm. You are free. Truly free. Perhaps for the first time in your life. The word echoed in my chest, unfamiliar and vast. Free. Freedom, I discovered, was terrifying. For 2 years, my life had been defined by fear. Fear of Evan finding me. Fear of losing my job. Fear of failing the child growing inside me. Now that the fear was gone, I didn't know what to fill the space with. Nikolai had been true to his word. Evan Blake had been systematically dismantled, his life reduced to rubble in the span of 3 weeks. The last I heard, he had fled the city entirely, running from creditors and ruined reputation to some distant state where no one knew his name. I could go anywhere now. Start over anywhere. Build a new life in any city, any country, any future I could imagine. Instead, I stayed at the estate in the Hudson Valley and tried to understand why. The answer, when it finally came, was simpler than I expected. I stayed because of Nikolai. Not because I needed his protection anymore, but because I wanted his presence. His quiet company during evening dinners. His voice reading Russian poetry while I dozed on the library couch. The way he looked at me like I was something precious. Something worth protecting. Something he was afraid to break with too much pressure. I stayed because for the first time in my life, Someone had given me safety without demanding anything in return, and I didn't know how to leave that behind. 6 weeks after my arrival at the estate, I found Nikolai in the library, staring out the window at the snow that had begun to fall. He didn't turn when I entered, but I saw his shoulders tense, felt the awareness that always seemed to crackle between us whenever we occupied the same space. "You've been avoiding me," I said. "I have been giving you space." "I don't want space." I moved closer, close enough to see the reflection of his face in the window glass. "I want to understand what this is, what we are." He was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than I had ever heard it. "You are a woman who came to me for help and received it. That is all this needs to be. That's not all it is, and you know it." He turned then, and the look in his eyes made my breath catch. Pain and longing and something that looked terrifyingly like love, all warring for dominance in those winter pale depths. "Camille." He said my name like a prayer, like a curse. "I am not a good man. The things I have done, the things I will do, they would horrify you if you knew the details. You deserve someone better. Someone who can give you a normal life, a safe life." "I don't want normal." I stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "I spent 2 years trying to be invisible, trying to survive, trying to pretend I didn't exist. I don't want to disappear anymore. I want to be seen." His hand came up, trembling slightly, and cupped my face with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so dangerous. "I see you," he whispered. "I have always seen you." "Then stop holding back." I turned my face into his palm, pressing a kiss against his calloused skin. "Stop treating me like I'm made of glass. I'm not fragile, Nikolai. I'm a survivor, and survivors don't break easily." Something shifted in his expression, some final barrier crumbling away. He pulled me against him, one hand tangled in my hair, the other pressed against the small of my back, and kissed me like he had been waiting his entire life for this moment. The kiss was everything, and nothing like I expected. Tender and fierce, gentle and consuming, a contradiction that somehow made perfect sense coming from him. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, I saw tears glistening in his eyes. "I do not deserve you," he said. "Maybe not." I reached up and wiped a tear from his cheek. "But I'm choosing you anyway. That's what freedom means, Nikolai. Getting to choose." He laughed, a broken sound that was half sob, and pulled me closer. "You are impossible. I'm exactly what you need." And standing there in his arms, with snow falling outside and my daughter kicking beneath my heart, I finally understood what it meant to come home. Not to a place, not to a building, but to a person who saw you, protected you, and loved you without ever asking for anything in return. 2 months later, I gave birth to a daughter with her father's gray eyes and my stubborn chin. Nikolai was there for every moment, holding my hand through the contractions, cutting the umbilical cord with hands that never trembled, crying when she was placed in his arms for the first time. "What will you name her?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. I looked at the tiny face, already so beloved, and smiled. "Hope," I said. "Her name is Hope." Because that was what she represented. Not just for me, but for both of us. A chance at something new. A future built on trust instead of fear. A love that had begun with a napkin passed across a crowded restaurant and grown into something neither of us had ever expected to find. Nikolai pressed a kiss to my forehead, then to Hope's, then to my lips. "My girls," he murmured against my mouth. "My family." And in that moment, surrounded by the man who had saved me and the child who had given me purpose, I finally understood that some walls were worth breaking. Some risks were worth taking. And some love stories began in the darkest moments, only to bloom into the most beautiful light. Motherhood transformed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. The first weeks after Hope's birth blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and moments of pure, overwhelming love that took my breath away. I would stand over her crib at 3 a.m, watching her tiny chest rise and fall, and feel tears streaming down my face without understanding why. Nikolai was there through all of it. He had converted the room adjacent to mine into a nursery, sparing no expense on cribs and changing tables and soft blankets in every shade of pink and cream. But more than the material things, he gave me his presence, his steady calm when I panicked over every small sound Hope made. His strong hands changing diapers with surprising competence at 4 a.m. His deep voice humming Russian lullabies that seemed to soothe our daughter when nothing else would. Our daughter. I had started thinking of her that way without realizing it. "She has your stubbornness," Nikolai observed one evening, watching me struggle to get Hope to take her bottle. The baby had decided she preferred nursing and was making her displeasure known at considerable volume. "She has your intensity," I countered, finally finding the angle that convinced Hope to accept the bottle. "Look at those eyes, already judging everything around her." He laughed, a sound I had grown to treasure over the past months. Nikolai didn't laugh often, but when he did, his whole face transformed, the hard edges softening into something almost boyish. "She will be formidable," he said, reaching out to stroke Hope's downy hair. "Like her mother." I watched his scarred fingers gentle against our daughter's head, and something fierce and protective swelled in my chest. This man, this dangerous, powerful man who commanded fear throughout the city, handled my baby like she was made of spun glass. The contradiction should have unsettled me. Instead, it made me love him more. Love. I had finally admitted the word to myself, even if I hadn't spoken it aloud to him. Spring arrived at the estate in a riot of color. The gardens that had been dormant when I first arrived now burst with tulips and daffodils, the air sweet with the scent of apple blossoms from the orchard behind the main house. I spent hours walking the grounds with Hope strapped to my chest, showing her flowers she was too young to see, narrating our surroundings in the running monologue. New mothers seemed to develop instinctively. Nikolai joined us when his business allowed, which was more often than I had expected. He had begun delegating more of his operations to trusted lieutenants, carving out time that he devoted entirely to us. I didn't ask what his business entailed anymore. Some truths were better left unexamined, and I had made my peace with the moral compromises that came with loving him. It was during one of these walks that he told me about the house. "I have been thinking," he said, his tone carefully casual in the way that meant he was about to say something significant. "This estate is beautiful, but it is isolated. Not ideal for raising a child who will need schools, friends, a community." I glanced at him, curious. "What are you suggesting?" "There is a property in the city, a townhouse in the Upper East Side, private, secure, but close to everything a growing family might need." He paused, and I saw something vulnerable flicker across his face. "I thought perhaps we might make it our home. Together. Our home. Together." The words hung in the spring air, weighted with implication. "Nikolai." I stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "Are you asking me to move in with you?" "I am asking you to build a life with me." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with infinite gentleness. "I know I am not what you imagined for yourself. I know my world is dangerous, complicated, morally gray at best. But I love you, Camille. I love Hope, and I want to spend whatever time I have left on this earth making both of you happy." It was the first time he had said the words aloud. "I love you." 3 syllables that changed everything. "I love you too," I whispered, and watched his expression transform from careful hope to radiant joy. He kissed me there in the garden, with Hope sleeping peacefully between us and the spring breeze carrying the scent of apple blossoms. It was tender and fierce, and everything I had stopped believing I would ever have. We moved into the townhouse 3 weeks later. The building was exactly as Nikolai had described, a 4-story brownstone with a private garden and security features so discreet I barely noticed them. He had already begun converting the top floor into a nursery and playroom, the walls painted in soft lavender and decorated with murals of fairy tale scenes. "You planned this," I accused, though I couldn't keep the smile from my voice. "You knew I would say yes. I hoped." He pulled me against him, his chin resting on top of my head. Hope is a powerful thing. Our first months in the city established new rhythms. Nikolai worked from a home office most days, attending to his various enterprises through phone calls and video conferences that I learned not to interrupt. I found a part-time position at a local nonprofit, using the organizational skills I had developed during my years of survival to help other women escape situations like the one I had fled. The irony was not lost on me. I had escaped one dangerous man, only to find safety in the arms of another. But Nikolai's danger had never been directed at me. His violence, whatever form it took, existed to protect rather than control. The distinction made all the difference. Hope thrived in her new environment. She was a happy baby, quick to smile and slow to fuss, with her father's pale eyes and my determined chin. Watching Nikolai with her became one of my greatest joys. The feared leader of the Russian organization in Manhattan, reduced to making ridiculous faces to earn a giggle from his infant daughter. "You are going soft," I teased him one evening, watching him attempt to assemble a complicated baby swing while Hope supervised from her bouncer. "I was always soft," he replied, not looking up from the instruction manual he was studying with intense concentration. "I simply hit it better." The fearsome Nikolai Artemyev, defeated by Swedish furniture assembly. He shot me a look that would have terrified his business associates. I just laughed. It was on Hope's 6-month birthday that the final shadow from my past reappeared. I was returning from a walk in Central Park, pushing Hope's stroller through the late autumn leaves, when I saw him. Evan Blake, thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under his eyes and a desperate hunger in his expression. He stood on the corner across from our townhouse, watching the building with an intensity that made my blood run cold. For a moment, I was paralyzed. All the fear I thought I had conquered came rushing back, freezing me in place on the sidewalk. My hands tightened on the stroller handle, my body instinctively positioning itself between Hope and the threat. Then Evan turned and saw me. Something terrible moved across his face. Rage and longing and bitter hatred, all tangled together in an expression that promised violence. He took a step toward me, and then he stopped. 2 men had appeared on either side of him, materializing from the crowd with the practiced ease of professionals. I recognized them as members of Nikolai's security team, the ones who maintained a constant but invisible presence around our family. They didn't touch Evan, didn't speak to him. They simply stood there, flanking him like bookends, their message unmistakable. Evan looked from them to me, and I watched the fight drain out of him. Whatever strength had brought him here, whatever desperate plan he had been nurturing, crumbled in the face of Nikolai's silent protection. He turned and walked away. I didn't see him again. That night, after Hope was asleep in her crib, and the townhouse had settled into its evening quiet, I found Nikolai in his study. He looked up when I entered, his expression shifting to concern when he saw my face. "You know," I said quietly, "about today. I know about everything that concerns your safety." He rose from his desk, crossing to take my hands in his. "I told you once that Evan Blake would never threaten you again. I meant it. What will happen to him? Nothing, unless he forces my hand." Nikolai's jaw tightened. He was given very clear warnings after his appearance today. If he is wise, he will finally accept that you are beyond his reach. If he is foolish. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I should have felt guilty. I should have worried about what might happen to a man I had once loved, however twisted that love had become. Instead, I felt only relief. Relief that my daughter was safe. Relief that Nikolai's protection extended to every corner of our lives. Relief that I had finally, truly escaped. "Thank you," I whispered, rising on my toes to press a kiss to his lips. "You never need to thank me for protecting our family." His arms wrapped around me, pulling me close. "It is not a favor. It is simply what I am. Our family." The words echoed in my heart, warm and certain. I had walked into a crowded restaurant 2 years ago, terrified and desperate, and slipped a napkin to a stranger. That single act of courage had led me here, to this moment, to this man, to a life I had never dared to imagine. Some people spend their whole lives searching for home. I had found mine in the most unexpected place, in the arms of a man whose love was fierce enough to burn away every shadow from my past. And as Nikolai held me in the quiet of his study, with our daughter sleeping peacefully upstairs, and the city glittering beyond our windows, I finally understood what it meant to be truly, completely free. Not the absence of danger, but the presence of someone willing to face any danger for you. That was freedom, that was love, that was home.